In 1924, you could buy a car that started in 30 seconds from cold, ran in near complete silence, reached 90 miles per hour, traveled 1,500 miles before needing water, and required no clutch, no gearbox, no distributor, and no spark plugs. It burned kerosene or gasoline or almost any liquid fuel you could find. At 70 miles per hour, the engine turned at 900 revolutions per minute and produced almost no vibration. Journalists who drove it described the experience as otherworldly. It cost the equivalent of $170,000 in today's money. Only 24 were ever built. And within 7 years, the company that made it was gone. This is the story of the Doble Series E, the most technically sophisticated steam car ever built, the last serious attempt to prove that steam could compete with the internal combustion engine on equal terms, and the vehicle that came closer to winning that argument than anything before or since. Abner Doble was not the first person to build a steam-powered automobile. Steam cars had existed since the 19th century. What Doble understood, and what his predecessors had failed to solve, was that steam power's fundamental disadvantage was not performance but inconvenience. Early steam cars required the driver to manually light the boiler, wait while pressure built, manage fuel and water separately, and understand enough about steam engineering to respond when something went wrong. They were vehicles for enthusiasts and engineers. Doble decided to build one for everyone else. His first significant breakthrough came with the Doble Detroit, developed in the early 1910s, which introduced key ignition to a steam car for the first time. Instead of manually lighting the boiler, the driver turned a key. An electrically driven fan provided forced draft. An atomized kerosene burner ignited automatically. The boiler regulation was handled by an electromechanical system using quartz rods that expanded with heat to shut off the burner and contracted as the system cooled to restart it. The driver did not need to understand any of this. They turned a key, like any other car. The Model E of 1922 refined everything Doble had learned into what became the definitive expression of steam car engineering. The boiler operated at 750 pounds per square inch and 750 degrees Fahrenheit. Pressures and temperatures that demanded exceptional material quality and manufacturing precision. The tubing alone ran to 575 feet of seamless cold-drawn steel coiled into a cylinder 22 inches in diameter. The entire assembly was cold water tested to 7,000 pounds per square inch, 10 times its operating pressure, before it left the factory. Doble was not building to a commercial cost target. He was building to a standard. The engine was a 4-cylinder Wolf compound unit, 2 high-pressure cylinders and 2 low-pressure cylinders working in sequence to extract maximum energy from the steam before exhausting it. There was no clutch because steam engines require no clutch. Torque is available from a standstill without any mechanical disconnection between engine and wheels. There was no gearbox because steam power delivers its torque characteristics across the entire speed range without the stepped ratios that internal combustion engines require. There was no distributor, no points, no carburetor. The mechanical complexity that made conventional cars of the 1920s unreliable simply did not exist in the Doble. The performance figures that resulted from this engineering were genuinely remarkable for 1924. 0 to 75 miles per hour in 10 seconds in a stripped test configuration. Sustained speeds above 90 miles per hour. In recent decades, Doble Series E cars have been run at speeds approaching 120 miles per hour, without streamlining, in vehicles that are a century old. The silence at speed was what impressed contemporary drivers most consistently. At 70 miles per hour, there was wind noise. There was almost nothing else. No exhaust note, no mechanical clatter, no vibration through the steering wheel. Passengers described it as riding in a very fast library. The fuel flexibility was equally significant. The Model E could burn kerosene, gasoline, fuel oil, or almost any liquid hydrocarbon with minimal adjustment. In an era before standardized fuel infrastructure, this was not a minor advantage. A Doble could be refueled wherever combustible liquid was available. The water tank held 24 gallons and provided a range of 1,500 miles between refills. In most climates, a driver would refuel with water from any tap, stream, or roadside source without any specialized equipment. 24 Model E cars were built between 1922 and 1925. The owners included Howard Hughes, who purchased at least 2, and the Maharajah of Bharatpur. Leno currently owns two surviving examples. 1. Engine number 9 is at the Ford Museum. Others survive in the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. Of the original 24, those known to have been scrapped number 5. The majority of Doble Series E cars built in the 1920s are still in existence a century later. A testament to the engineering quality that Abner Doble refused to compromise on regardless of the financial consequences. And the financial consequences were severe. Each car cost between $8,800 and $11,200 in 1923 dollars, equivalent to between $134,000 and $170,000 today. At those prices, the market was necessarily tiny. Abner Doble compounded the commercial problem with his own character. He was constitutionally incapable of declaring a design finished. Every car that left the factory incorporated refinements from whatever he had been thinking about since the previous one. Production was slow, inconsistent, and expensive. The company never achieved the volume that would have allowed costs to fall to competitive levels. In 1931, Doble Steam Motors closed. Abner Doble spent the following decades as a consultant, working in New Zealand on steam buses, in Germany with Henschel & Son on steam trucks and railcars, in England with Sentinel Wagon Works on locomotives and railcars. His patents and plant were acquired by the Bessler brothers, who used Doble technology to develop a steam-powered biplane successfully test-flown in 1933, the only steam aircraft ever to fly. In the mid-1950s, GM developed two experimental steam cars using Doble patents dating to 1920. As late as 1954, Abner Doble was still working on steam propulsion, developing a unit designed to operate at 2,000 pounds per square inch for a California engineering company before that project too was eventually canceled. He never stopped believing steam could win. In 1937, he wrote that any new steam car would have to be superlatively good to compete with gasoline vehicles of the day, but that he still considered it just possible with good management and sufficient money. He had spent 30 years demonstrating the superlatively good part. The good management and sufficient money never arrived in the quantities the idea required. The internal combustion engine won the 20th century not because it was the best solution to the problem of personal transportation. It won because it was cheap enough to manufacture at scale, simple enough to maintain without specialized knowledge, and supported by an infrastructure of fuel distribution and mechanical expertise that steam never accumulated. The Doble Series E was a better vehicle by almost every performance and reliability measure than the cars it competed with in 1924. It lost anyway. That is the honest history of the Doble. Not a story of failure, but a story of what happens when the right answer arrives at the wrong price, built by a man too committed to perfection to make the compromises that commercial survival required. The 24 cars he built are mostly still running, a century later, in silence.